Losers. Yes, I realized it was a little bit of a weird ending there to the stream, but this is the winners and losers of the NFL draft. We're going to jump straight because this is going to be a short video. Winners. I listed this kind of, best to worst, and then I gave an honorable mention. New York Jets definitely, I believe, had the best draft. They ended up with 3 picks in the first round. They got Garrett Wilson, possibly the best wide receiver, which was a big positional need for the Jets. They got Danny Johnson with their 3rd first-round pick, who was debatably a top 5 prospect. Definitely one of the better edge rushers in the draft. And then with their second pick, with their first original pick, they got Sauce Gardner. Right after the Texans took Derek Stingley, where Sauce Gardner was kind of a better corner, more NFL ready. So the Texans miss on Sauce Gardner. The Jets pick him up. Then they get possibly the best receiver in the draft. Then also in the first round, they pick up one of the better edge rushers in the draft. They got Breece Hall, the best running back in the draft, to compete with Michael Carter for the starting job. They got a little bit of O-line depth, a little bit of tight end depth later in the rounds. I gave them an A+. The Jets definitely won the draft. The other New York team, the New York Giants, also did extremely well in the draft. They had 2 first-round picks. With number 5, they got Evan Neal, the best pass blocker in the NFL, or in the NFL draft. And then with number 7, they significantly improved their pass rushing game with Kayvon Thibodeau, who at one point was mocked to go number 1 overall in the NFL draft. He falls all the way to 7. The Giants get the best offensive lineman, possibly the best edge rusher, with 5 and 7. They added a little bit of inside offensive line depth later in the draft. They picked up Cordell Flute, Flott, who was one of the best physical corners in the draft. I think they got him like 3rd or 4th round. And they also got some receiver help in Wendell Robinson in the 2nd round out of Kentucky. So the Giants having a really good draft as well. The Detroit Lions, most of the people that had really good draft nights are bad teams, but we'll get there. The Lions also had a good draft. The Jaguars, 1st overall, took Trayvon Walker. They took potential over proven ability. So the Detroit Lions ends up with Adrian Hutchinson, who is the most proven player in the NFL draft. They trade up to get Jameson Williams, who, if he didn't get injured in the national title game this past season, would have been the number 1 receiver taken in this draft. Later on, they take a couple good pass rushers. I think they get a little bit more wide receiver as you look deeper into the draft. But getting Aiden Hutchinson, who is the best overall player in the draft, proven-wise, and then getting Jameson Williams, who, if not for that injury, would have been the best receiver in the draft. Definitely a win for the Detroit Lions. And then that brings us to the Philadelphia Eagles, who didn't really win this as much for their drafting as they did for their trade. They traded for A.J. Brown in the 1st round of the draft with the Tennessee Titans. They traded up to get defensive tackle Jordan Davis to replace Fletcher Cox when Fletcher Cox leaves in the next couple of years. They got the best inside linebacker in Nakobe Dean in the later parts of the 3rd round. But the A.J. Brown trade, giving Jalen Hurts a big weapon in A.J. Brown, is probably the best thing the Eagles have done ever in draft night, at least for the past 5-10 years. So kudos to the Philadelphia Eagles for finally not fucking up draft night. And I gave an honorable mention to the Baltimore Ravens, who didn't have great picks. Like, they didn't have great number-wise picks. I think they were like fucking 19 and 25 or something like that. But they got Kyle Hamilton. They lucked up with Kyle Hamilton, who was the best safety in the draft, one of the best defensive backs in the draft. As far as draft prospects, I think he was as high as 3 or 4. He fell all the way to the Ravens. The Ravens also got Tyler Linderbaum, who was the best inside offensive lineman in the draft at the center position. And then in the 2nd round, they picked up David Ojabo, who, before he got injured in the combine, was also a 1st-round pick. They got him later in the 2nd round. So Baltimore getting a dub there. They added Travis Jones, more inside defensive line help, and then Jalen Armour Davis to help out their cornerback depth. So the Ravens getting better, but I got them as an honorable mention. The losers, sadly enough, I had to put them first just because they're my favorite team, the New Orleans Saints. Although they traded up for Chris Olave, which is good, they needed wide receiver help. They also needed quarterback, and they also needed offensive line. So with their second first-round pick, they picked Taylor Penning. They left Jermaine Johnson, George Karlaftis on the board to pick Taylor Penning. They got their second-round pick. They go Alontae Taylor at corner instead of going Malik Willis, who surprisingly enough was still sitting on the board. Malik Willis was mocked to go as early as 10, 11 overall. He's sitting there for us in the second round. We don't take him. We take Alontae Taylor. I think that was a big loss for the Saints, and that's why they are my top loser. New England Patriots also kind of lost because they picked a potential third-rounder in Cole Strange with their first-round pick. They picked 2 running backs and a quarterback with 3 of their 5 later round picks when they have, I think, 4 or 5 running backs already on the roster. They picked 2 more, and they just picked Mac Jones last year. Now they pick a quarterback with like their 7th round pick or some shit this year. Total loss. They picked Tyquan Thornton, which I think helps their wide receiver room a little bit. But just because you picked a third rounder in the first round and then you beefed up 2 positions where you already were kind of deep in, you are on the losers. Jacksonville Jaguars, first overall, they took Trayvon Walker instead of Aiden Hutchinson. They're basing their pick based off his athleticism and what he could be and not what he already is. That's bad for a team that needs everything and that could use the best player available in the draft. So you lose for that. Then you pick Devin Lloyd. That's good. You failed to add any depth in the draft at O-line or wide receiver. Trevor Lawrence was one of the most hit quarterbacks in the league last year. You give him no protection. You got Christian Kirk in free agency. Cool. You lost DJ Chark. You're pretty much even with weapons. And then you drafted 2 corners with their last 2 picks of the draft instead of going O-line or wide receiver. So the Jaguars probably be picking in the top 3 again next year. They are absolute trash. They're on my losers. Houston Texans, another team that's probably going to be picking in the top 3 next year. They picked Stingley over Sauce Gardner with the 3rd pick. Then they picked Keon Green over Taylor Penning, Jahan Dodson, Traylon Burks, all with their second first overall pick. They did add John Meteschi and Christian Harris, who could help at receiver and linebacker. But they already failed twice with their first two round picks, and they failed to get a big offensive line or a receiver name, and their defense just needed way too much to be happy with Christian Harris and Derek Stingley in the draft there. So big loser to the Texans. Honorable mention in the loser category for the Chicago Bears, who did not have a first-round pick, but although they are in desperate need of wide receiver and O-line help to help Justin Fields, they did not take an offensive lineman until round 5, and they did not take a wide receiver until the third overall pick. So they had 3 picks in the 3rd round, and they drafted 2 DBs, Kyler Gordon and Jaquan Brisker, before they chose, I think it was like, who'd they pick? Jordan Pickens. So I think they picked like Venice Jones Jr. or some shit. But by picking Gordon and Brisker, they missed out on Wendell Robinson, John Meteschi, Tyquan Thornton, George Pickens, Sky Moore. And then by picking Gordon, they missed out on Andrew Booth, who is definitely the better prospect than Kyler Gordon. So Chicago Bears just all around fucking up their draft, not picking a receiver. All bad news. Winners of the draft, New York Jets. New York teams won the draft. Who knows what that'll do for them in the upcoming season. But they did good in April.